Now what I'd like to do is introduce Mr. Tom Popik. The first time I met him was a couple of years ago when we had a relatively small meeting at the U.S. Army War College on this very topic. And on a break, we're just talking with each other, like I hope you'll get the chance to do during the course of the day. And I not only discovered that he's a smart guy, he's from MIT and so on, I discovered he's a very thorough researcher. Because when we were talking, there was an obscure report that I had commissioned called the SAGE Policy Report. Let's see a show of hands of everybody who read that. Whoa, 10. I'm surprised. Okay. So there's probably 10 more people in the country who've read it. But it basically was an economic impact assessment on what would happen to the economy in a region between Richmond and Baltimore if a small, medium, or high impact event would happen. So lo and behold, I'm sitting there talking to this guy for the first time, and he learns my name, and he says, "Are you the guy who did that report?" And it sort of blew me away that he had been doing such thorough investigation on his own that he would come across that and be able to discuss it with me. So I was duly impressed from that first moment. So now what I'd like to do is give him an opportunity to talk about his own story, about how he uncovered these issues and what he's doing about it as a citizen, as well as a person who's formed a foundation or used his foundation to research this issue further and try to help people do something about it. Tom?
Well, thank you very much, Chuck. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to be in front of you today and to talk to you not only about electric grid reliability, but also my own story of how I became involved in this. I should tell you, I'm not an expert on the electric grid. I've never worked for an electric utility. I'm just a private citizen. I live in southern New Hampshire. It's an area which is especially prone to electric grid outages due to weather-related causes. And my family has been without power for days on end on several occasions. So in the fall of 2010, I learned that the federal agency that regulates electric grid reliability is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I also learned that they have meetings that are open to the public. So I had a business trip scheduled for Washington, D.C. I had a little extra time. I thought I'd go by this public meeting and see what was going on. I got there about an hour early, and a number of other people also got there an hour early. These were industry lawyers and lobbyists. It wasn't too long before they discovered that there was someone new in the room. It was a little bit of a club kind of atmosphere where everyone knew everyone else and they all got along together. And so they asked me who I was and why I was there. And I said, well, I'm a concerned citizen, and I'm concerned about the reliability of the electric grid. And one of them told me, to my great surprise, that I was only the second private citizen in recent memory that had taken any interest in electric grid reliability at FERC, as it's called. And the first citizen actually had been a federal prisoner and was not able to attend the meetings in person. So, yeah, it's pretty funny, but it's sad in a way, too. So I introduced myself to Joseph McClellan, who then was the Director of Electric Reliability at FERC, and he told me that their agency has a very large problem. They have a formal rulemaking process, and as that process moves forward, there's the opportunity for public comment. They regularly receive hundreds of comments from the electric utility industry, but not a single comment from the public. And this makes it very difficult for the staff at FERC to balance the public interest against corporate interests. At the time, I knew that electric grid reliability was a major issue from some of the research that Chuck Manto had referred to. There was an organization, and still is, Impact America, that's a grassroots organization that I had tuned into some of their radio shows. And then another organization, Dr. Chris Beck's organization, who preceded me, the Electric Infrastructure Security Council. And very importantly, the Congressional EMP Commission had published 2 unclassified reports on the internet, which I was able to access. and which were very educational. And finally, I had attended a 3-day conference at the Army War College on military planning for catastrophic infrastructure events. And I would like to say, isn't it a wonderful country we live in when a private citizen can be involved and can actually go to the Army War College and sit in a 3-day presentation with all sorts of senior government officials? You know, what a wonderful and open society we live in. So I'm happy to report that since 2010, multiple public interest groups have started to comment on the FERC dockets for electric reliability. I saw an unmet need for the connection between nuclear safety and electric reliability, and co-founded my own group, the Foundation for Resilient Societies. We submitted a 100-page petition for rulemaking to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and this petition, if approved, would require nuclear plant operators to install backup power sources for their spent fuel pools. This would substantially mitigate radiation releases should there be a long-term loss of outside power. We submitted this petition for rulemaking in draft form to the NRC in February 2011, and that was about 1 month before the Fukushima events in Japan. And I think that to the public, those events in Japan really clearly demonstrated what happens to nuclear power plants when they're deprived of commercial grid power. So again, I'm not an electric reliability expert. And as a matter of fact, I receive no compensation at all for my work with the foundation. I, in fact, have a day job in an unrelated field. I know that many of you in this room, however, are bona fide infrastructure experts, and some of you just fall into the concerned citizen category like I do. What I'd like to say is that all of us can do a wonderful service to our country and also to our communities if we encourage the government and private industry to address the great vulnerability of the commercial electric grid. And we've heard about this already this morning from a number of people, including Congressman Roscoe Bartlett. So I should say our situation now is indeed dire. According to a report prepared by the Oak Ridge National Laboratory and sponsored by 2 government agencies, FERC and the U.S. Department of Energy, an extreme solar storm could leave 100 million Americans without power for a period of 1 to 2 years. And also, there's a recently declassified report by the National Academy of Sciences that describes the vulnerability of the electric grid to terrorist attack. We know just from recent experience that the electric grid is extremely vulnerable. So I'll read off some major outages we've had just in the past 2 years. In February 2011, we had the Texas cold snap outage. In August 2011, we had the Hurricane Irene outage. Many of you here in the Washington, D.C. area may have experienced that. In September 2011, we had the Arizona Southern California outage. In October 2011, we had a New England ice storm outage. And most recently, we had the Hurricane Sandy outages in New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, and elsewhere. So I think that those outages, which have been very significant, many of them have been due to weather-related causes, but some also due to propagating network collapse. It really demonstrates how fragile the electric grid is. I'm sorry to say that the electric utility industry and its self-regulatory body, which is the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, have not always been proactive in improving electric grid reliability. So an excellent case study is the protection against solar storms, or so-called geomagnetic disturbances. A moderate solar storm hit the Canadian province of Quebec in March 1989 and caused a province-wide blackout. In the 23 intervening years, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation and the electric utility industry have done very little to protect against solar storms. Right now, our only protection is something that's called operating procedures. And essentially, these are steps that utilities take to prop up the grid, but won't necessarily prevent long-term equipment damage. It's also important to understand these so-called operating procedures depend on advance warning from a single satellite, and this satellite is long past its planned operational life, and in fact it could fail at any time. So we have to remember that large segments of the American population are really depending on this advance warning from only a single piece of equipment. I travel up and down the East Coast for my day job, Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and I marvel at these great cities, which I know could go dark for years were we to get a so-called Carrington event solar storm, or if the utilities, with only 1/2 hour of warning from the satellite, failed to de-energize the most vulnerable transformers and prevent long-term equipment damage. Congressman Bartlett referred to the difficulty of black start for today's grid, and I'd like to reinforce that point. Increasingly, electric generation is powered by natural gas. If you think about it a moment, the natural gas pipelines are controlled and in some cases actually pumped by electricity. So there's this catch-22 situation. It would be very difficult to restart a lot of generation resources that depend on natural gas because the gas pipelines don't have electricity. So I can say with unfortunate certainty that if we have a widespread grid collapse, any recovery from that is going to be very difficult indeed. In August 2011, Dr. George Baker and I, also Peter Pry and some other people here in the room, joined the North American Electric Reliability Geomagnetic Disturbance Task Force. Congress, in showing remarkable wisdom when they established the legislation authorizing NERC as a self-regulatory body, they mandated that the meetings of NERC be open to the public. And so we have been able to attend these meetings. And I'm sorry to say that there has been a lot of resistance from the electric utility industry and also from NERC, as it's called, for protection against geomagnetic disturbance. And there's also, I should say, been a lot of resistance for protection against cyber threats as well as weather-related outages. I'll give you a couple examples just for rudimentary cyber protection standards that include specifying what the critical assets are. That's taken 5 years. To establish a standard for what is called vegetation management, it's a fancy term for tree trimming. To get the tree trimming standard together, that also took 5 years. So we have a complicated problem with solar storms and geomagnetic disturbance, and we're working on 23 years for that. I should say, in fairness, the U.S. electric power industry is composed of thousands of producers and distributors, and there's overlapping state and federal regulation. There's also competing demands on the industry. There's environmental regulations. There's increased demands for renewable resources such as wind and solar. There is always the need for low-cost generation and low rates. And all these things have to be balanced against electric grid reliability. Having said this, if we have a widespread and long-term outage, I can guarantee you that all these practical difficulties are going to be quickly forgotten when we have government inquiries and, frankly, a lot of public outrage. So, I ask myself and all of you, how can we, as infrastructure experts, or in my case, private citizens, prevent what could be an impending disaster? In a word, we need to collectively and individually make known our concerns to both the regulators and to legislators. The good news here is that the professional staff of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has been very receptive and very proactive in trying to establish new standards. However, FERC can't set standards on their own. They can only request that a standard be set, and the self-regulatory body, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, then has to develop the standard. Within the standard setting process, it's very important that there be comments from the public. I started off this morning by telling you the story of how Joseph McClellan, Director of the Office of Electric Reliability, said how important this is. And I'd like to finish by telling you a little bit more about how you can become involved. There is a docket at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that's open right now. It's rulemaking docket RM 1222, and any of you in the room could comment on that docket. And if you've sat through the presentations this morning, you're well qualified as a member of the public to say something that would be intelligent in regards to electric reliability, and also that would be taken very seriously by the professional staff and commissioners at FERC. So I'm going to encourage you to do that, and if you come up to me during a break and you give me your business card, I'd be happy to email you instructions about how you can actually file those comments. I'd also ask you to continue to be involved in organizations that promote critical infrastructure protection, including protection of the electric grid. I think that the FBI Special Interest Group on EMP is a prime example of an organization that can have significant influence on governmental processes. And so, just in closing before the questions, I do very much appreciate the opportunity to come in front of you, and I really look forward to any very direct and candid questions that you might have. Thank you.
Now you can. As people line up to come to this mic and ask questions, I thought I'd lead one myself. If you do have a question, come my way if you can, and don't be embarrassed. So, Tom, in your opinion, in terms of the whole issue of awareness, what do you think the specific issues that were raised by the Fukushima event did to raise awareness in this country? And from your point of view anyway, what do you think some of the similarities may be or not be, or the differences between what they experienced and what we might potentially experience if we had a GMD or other type of power outage that would minimize the ability of cooling tanks to function at nuclear power plants?
Sure, Chuck. The first thing I'd point out is that the vendor for the nuclear power plants in Japan is identical to the vendor for a large proportion of U.S. Power plants. And so were the U.S. nuclear power plants to lose power in an equivalent way, we could see the same results. So that's the similarity. I will say I think that the Japanese are significantly less complacent about this issue than the American public is. I know that the folks at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission have really been energized, and I've been very encouraged by the amount of attention that they've started to pay to the issue. But more public attention here in the United States would always be valuable.
Hi, my name is Gail Nordling. I work for a company called Imprimis, and we have partnered with a large company, ABB, to develop a solution for solar storms for the grid and the transformers, and we have been able to wring the costs out of it to the point where is very inexpensive, and the utilities, by being able to operate the grid differently, actually save money and can be paid back within a year. But my question to you is, I think utilities some years ago thought this was going to cost like $1 gajillion and there was no good solution, et cetera. Well, we're by that now, but do you think, and I assume you believe, that the utilities still need some form of encouragement to move ahead and to do it in a timely fashion?
They do need encouragement. I will say that I've talked to a significant number of engineers that work for electric utilities as part of the Geomagnetic Disturbance Task Force and in other venues. And many of these people are extraordinarily dedicated to keeping the grid up for societal benefit. They're not just doing their jobs because they're paid to do their jobs. They really believe what they're doing, and they have really good intentions. The problem is that the electric utility industry has been stretched so many different ways. The recent environmental regulations are one example. There are other examples, and a lot of times the operational people don't have a lot of time to take on what some of them perceive as one more burden. When you get up to the executive level, costs are a concern and low rates are a concern. The strange thing is, if effective mitigation equipment, and Imprimis is one potential vendor, there are other potential vendors as well. If this equipment were installed, it would probably actually save the utilities money. And the reason for this is that anytime we get a minor solar storm, there's what's called uneconomic dispatch. That means that the power is flowing through routes that aren't necessarily the most efficient, and that costs the utilities money. So if we were to get the grid protected, it would probably also save money. There's one other concern, though. The electric grid right now is working in what I would call an operationally tested configuration. And if the additional hardware is added to the grid, there would need to be confidence that it wouldn't in some unexpected way actually destabilize the grid. The fortunate thing is recently there have been tests of equipment that would both stabilize the grid and we would make sure that by installing the new equipment it wouldn't cause unforeseen problems. And so the good news is that there are multiple companies that have proposed solutions. It looks like these solutions are cost effective, and they would save not only the grid from damage in a major solar storm, but they could also potentially save the utilities money in everyday operations.
Okay, any other questions? I have the mic. Okay, Tom, any more thoughts that you'd like to convey?
I do have one more thought.
Okay.
It's wonderful that we have so many people in the room this morning. The core group of people who really follow these electric reliability issues is quite small, and even a dozen people added to the number of concerned citizens would have a substantial effect. Just with a few dozen of us, we were able to get this notice of proposed rulemaking for geomagnetic disturbance protection. So I'd really encourage people to get involved. I know a lot of you have technical backgrounds that could be very valuable in the effort, and so just a little bit of extra resources and people could really make a substantial difference.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you about mentioning InfraGard as well. As you know, if you go to infragard.net, that's spelled I-N-F-R-A, like infrastructure, G-A-R-D, because the only thing that's missing is you. You go to infragard.net and you can sign up. It doesn't cost any money yet. They might have to start charging a little something, but so far it's free. The only difficulty is printing out a form that you sign, because you have to sign that mutual non-disclosure agreement, and permission to run the background check on you and fax it back in. That's all it's to it. In the back of the room, you'll see this brochure. It's very simple to read, that talks about InfraGard and the EMP SIG, so you all are welcome to join. Individuals join. So if your company's interested, still you join as an individual. I thought I should mention that. What I'd like to do now is getting ready, before I introduce the next speaker,